Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into something a little less comfortable, a scratchy woolen tunic in the cold. Hard floor beneath a banquet table in Tudor England. You're not a guest here. No, you're part of the invisible army that makes this whole operation run. The feast is over. The fire crackles low in the great hall. Grease stains glisten faintly on the wooden floorboards. And the air still hums with the echoes of laughter, lute music, and someone belching with pride. You're exhausted, limbs aching, but there's nowhere else to go. So you slide beneath the long oak table, find a patch of relatively dry floor, curl up next to a half-eaten turnip, and try not to breathe too loud. You probably won't survive this life very long. Not with the parasites, the accidents, the gossip, and the utter lack of privacy. But that's not your concern right now. Right now, your job is to sleep in, maybe, just maybe, overhear a scandal or two from the dinner above you. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know where in the world are you listening from, and what time is it for you right now? Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across the flagstones, one hand on the tray of trenchers, the other scratching a flea bite on your elbow. The kitchen boys are still scrubbing pots, steam rising around them like ghostly halos. You smell the cloying sweetness of mead, the fatty remains of a boar's head, and something suspiciously like moldy cheese. Your day's been long since before dawn, and now you're just hoping for a corner under the high table that docent reek of spilled wine. The great hall is slowly emptying. Nobles retreat to their chambers, murmuring and yawning, their bellies full and their heads spinning. Some drag fur-trimmed cloaks behind them like sleepy children with blankets. The musicians pack up their crumhorns and tabors. You wipe a goblet with your sleeve, slip it back onto the serving cart and wait. You can't go to sleep until your overseer nods. He does. Barely. Just a flick of the eyes and a grunt, but that's all the permission you need. You take a candle stub and crouch low, moving through the table legs like a cat, trying not to bump the silver. There's a certain unspoken etiquette to sleeping here. You choose a spot beneath the master's end closer to the hearth. And warmth is a luxury, and so is silence. You lie down on your side, cloak wrapped tight, cheek resting on your bundled apron. The rushes on the floor crackle faintly. There are food scraps nearby, bits of crust, a forgotten fig, the heel of a cheese rind. Not that you're hungry, just aware. Everything smells. The wool of your own tunic smells. The underside of the table smells. You think someone dropped eel sauce earlier? It's very much still present. Above you, the last of the tallow candles flickers, casting a dim golden light through the slats of the tabletop. You can hear footsteps creaking on the gallery stairs, one of the daughters of the house, perhaps whispering to a maid. A dog lets out a single bark in the courtyard, and someone hushes it. Then finally quiet. You might think sleeping here would be awful, and you'd be mostly right. But there's a strange comfort in it, too. You're not alone. Other servants curl up nearby. You recognize the rhythm of their breath, the slight wheeze of the steward's son. The way the scullery girl twitches in her sleep like a dreaming rabbit. There's a community in this shared discomfort, kind of solidarity born of aching feet and burnt fingers. Historians still argue whether this arrangement was purely pragmatic or if it carried subtle status cues. Some believe it signified proximity to power. You, under the table, were part of the inner circle of the household machine. Others say it was simply a matter of space. Bedrooms were for nobility. Servants made do in the floor. Well, it didn't complain. You can't stretch out completely. Your knees would knock a chair leg. So you curl tighter, like a comma, and let the day replay itself behind your eyelids. You remember polishing pewter, scraping candle wax from a windowsill, and delivering a message to the cook while dodging flying poultry. At one point, someone slapped your backside with a leak. You didn't flinch. That's just the job. Just before sleep takes you, you hear something strange. Scraping, like metal against stone. You lift your head a little. Goblet, a spoon. Be a mouse trying to drag off a marrow bone twice its size. Or maybe it's nothing. You tuck your face back into your arm and drift. This is how it goes. Every night. You sleep in the same clothes you worked in. You wake with crumbs in your hair and the indent of a table leg on your forehead. There's no feather mattress, no pillow embroidered with your initials, It's just a servant's floor, a servant's dream, and a servant's morning, waiting too soon on the other side of the dark. The sun isn't up yet, but you are, or at least you're trying to be. There's a moment of confusion. Where are you? What day is it? Whose foot is that? You squint into the murky, pre-dawn haze under the high table and feel the weight of something on your back. Ah, the scullery girl's elbow. Again, you sit up slowly. Joints stiff, the chill of the stone floor seeping up through your bones. No time to stretch. You've got a chamber pot to fetch and 36 pewter cups to polish before the steward even considers looking your way. Your first stop is the buttery, where the flagstones are wet and cold beneath your bare feet. You've long since lost your shoes, or maybe someone nicked them last winter when you took them off to sleep. Either way, your calluses are thick now, and you barely feel the puddles as you cross into the servants' passage. The buttery maid hands you a loaf of bread, still warm and shockingly generous. That won't last. This is probably left over from last night's table and slightly overbaked, but you tuck it under your arm like treasure and take a bite on the move. It's dry. You love it. By the time the great hall starts to fill with light from the high windows, you've already lit 2 fires scrubbed. The long table clean of last night's wine rings and fished a small piece of roasted parsnip out of someone's boot. You don't ask questions anymore. You make your way toward the back kitchen, where the work is just beginning. The cooks are arguing. Already one claims the venison was shorted. Another insists the queen herself complimented her minced pie. You keep your head down. The air is hot with rising steam, flour dust, and the distinct temps of old fish brine. A basket of eels twitches ominously in the corner. Try not to make eye contact. There are chickens to pluck. Dozens. You grab one from the bench and begin methodically yanking feathers while your mind drifts elsewhere. It's a soothing rhythm in its own horrific way. The skin beneath your fingernails goes numb, and eventually you stop feeling the tiny pricks of each stubborn feather. Someone sneezes nearby, and you instinctively flinch. The last time someone sneezed in the kitchen, the cook threw a turnip at their head. You hear it hit the wall, then the grunt of impact. Another turnip lost to workplace tension. It's your rhythm now. Early mornings, endless tasks, whispered conversations behind pantry doors, and the quiet shame of being always slightly sticky. And yet, among the endless scurrying and shouting, there's a certain strange dignity in it. You're part of the machine, an essential cog in the Tudor household's daily grind. You pass the laundress in the hallway, her arms full of steaming linens. She grunts in acknowledgement. You've never heard her say a full sentence, but you suspect she knows everything. She once removed a red wine stain from a bishop's surplice, with nothing but vinegar and stubbornness. She's a legend, really. You make your way back to the hall and help set up the table for the household breakfast. It's a simple affair: bread, ale, and maybe some boiled eggs if the henhouse performed miracles overnight. You arrange the trenchers flat, round slabs of stale bread that serve as plate sand. Place each goblet with military precision. As you work, your mind wanders. You remember that yesterday the steward tripped on a loose rush and blamed it on the pages. One of them cried. You didn't, but you thought about it. You're not above crying, you're just better at hiding it now. Historians still debate how strictly Tudor servant hierarchies were enforced, especially among the lower ranks. Some argue there was camaraderie, shared jokes, even affection. Others point to the endless records of fines, punishments, and the occasional servant mysteriously vanishing after a kitchen fire.
Not the truth.
Like everything Tudor, probably lies somewhere in between laughter and fear. By mid-morning, you've cleaned out 2 chamber pots. Shoot a goose out of the pantry twice. Accidentally eavesdropped on a scandalous conversation between the ladyess maid and a very married stable boy. You won't repeat it, of course. But you do store it away in the part of your brain reserved for survival leverage. It's just in case. You catch a glimpse of yourself in a pewter platter and barely recognize the reflection's mudged cheeks. A wayward curl, eyes half closed from lack of sleep. But there's a spark in there too, a slyness. A knowledge that you've already done more before noon than some lord will do all week. Still, it's only breakfast. You've got an entire day of chores ahead. Wood to chop, boots to shine, letters to deliver. And a mysterious smell in the west chamber that absolutely must be investigated. You sigh, tie your apron tighter, and prepare for battle. After all, the lords and ladies might feast in grandeur, but it's you who keeps the castle breathing. You halfway through dragging a dripping mop across the tiled passage outside the Lord's study when you hear your name. Not your real name, your servant name. The one the steward barked out on your first day, and you've answered to ever since. You drop the mop handle with a tired thud and straighten up, wiping your hands on your apron, even though it's already soaked. You've been summoned, and that never means rest. The steward points to a smudge on the sideboard in the main hall. You squint at it. It's faint, barely visible unless the sunlight hits it just so. What? That is the thing about serving in a Tudor household. Perfection, ISNT, an aspiration. It's a requirement. And when perfection involves polished wood, silver that gleams like moonlight, and rushes that smell faintly of rosemary, there's no room for smudges. You clean it thoroughly. Then check 3 more sideboards just in case. You're learning that anticipating orders is better than waiting to be barked at. As you pass back through the hall, you pause at the long oak table, the centerpiece of every mealtime, and the nighttime roof over your weary head. It's massive, thick, hand-hewn, and heavy enough that it takes 4 grown men and a prayer to move it. You glance under it and feel a strange affection. It's not just a table to you. It's your bunk, your retreat, your private corner, in a life that allows you almost no privacy. Historians still argue whether sleeping under the table was a privilege or a punishment. On one hand, it meant proximity to warmth, to the fire, to the heart of the household. On the other, it was drafty, public, and occasionally hazardous to your nose if someone dropped a pickled onion mid-feast. But here's the odd thing, many of you prefer it. There's a strange pride in being the one trusted to linger near the lords, to hear the murmurs of planning and politics, to witness the ceremonial slicing of pies with quail eggs baked inside. You get closer than the garden boys or the kitchen hands ever do. You belong to the rhythm of the great hall, its chaos, its ceremony, and its crumbs. Of course, that proximity comes with risk. One ill-timed cough while a noble is speaking, and you might find yourself demoted to dung removal. That happened to a footman last month. He coughed during grace, and now he empties the poultry pits. Still, you get to witness moments most servants only hear about in gossip. Like when the master tripped on his robe and nearly knocked over the bishop, or when the cook, red in the face, stormed into the hall during supper to accuse someone of stealing the entire goose. No one confessed. You suspect the hound under the bench knows more than it lets on. You also get to handle the leftovers, what the nobility call leavings. These are the trenchers, soaked in sauce, scattered with scraps of fish and cheese. Some servants turn their noses up. You do not. You're hungry, always. And there's something oddly satisfying about nibbling the edge of a noble's untouched apple tart. After supper, while the others clear dishes and wipe down chairs, you begin your routine, folding your apron into a makeshift pillow, eyeing the floorboards for new spills, and quietly edging your way back beneath the table. Tonight, the fire is lower than usual. You wrap your arms around yourself. You hear footsteps above you, the lady of the house, pacing as she dictates a letter to her scribe. Her voice is soft but clipped. Words like dowry in Portugal drift down through the thick oak. You don't understand all of it, but you recognize importance when you hear it. This, oddly, is one of your favorite parts of the day. The stillness, the occasional clink of silver, the crack of the hearth settling, and always, always the hum of quiet voices, plotting marriages, trade routes, or who should be banished from dinner next Thursday. You learn a lot this way. Who's in favor? Who's fallen from grace? Which noblewoman has taken to fainting for attention? And which page boy's poetry is driving everyone mad? You shift slowly. You have to be careful the last time someone kicked the table leg during a late-night eavesdrop. The steward made them scrub the privy steps with a rag for a week. You still don't know how a rag cleaned anything. Eventually, you doze. It's a twitchy, half-alert sort of sleep, where your dreams blur with muffled conversations and the creaking of rafters. The table above you groans occasionally as someone leans against it. You dream that you are part of the table carved into its grain, a servant forever embedded in oak. And maybe in some way you are. The hall remembers you. Every floorboard scuff, every splatter wiped clean, every nap stolen beneath the trestles, it all leaves a mark. Because in a Tudor household, grandeur is built on 1,000 quiet acts of labor. The polished silver gleams because of your spit and sleeve. The fire roars because you hauled the logs. The nobles dine in splendor because someone, namely you, scrubbed a trout scales off the table before they arrived. And at night, while they snore behind velvet curtains, you stretch out beneath the same table where they toasted their triumphs. And you sleep like a thread woven into the tapestry of the day. Your back still aches from the stone floor. But it's the smell that wakes you, an unmistakable mixture of beef drippings, ale-soaked breadcrumbs, and damp wool. The hall is already alive again, faint morning chatter drifting in from the servants' corridor. You roll out from under the long table, brushing crumbs off your sleeve and narrowly missing a pewter jug someone left balanced on the edge. The floor is scattered with the detritus of last night's feast. Chewed bones, dropped trenchers, a wilted sprig of parsley that someone probably tried to eat as a joke. You take a moment to survey the battlefield as if you're some sort of defeated knight waking on the losing side. If knights had dried gravy in their hair. You begin the day with a chore that sounds quaint until you actually do it. Clearing the trenchers. These are the edible plates made of stale bread-thick slabs, baked hard and used to hold meat, sauce, and whatever else the guests piled on during the meal. Once they're done, the trenchers are handed down, literally, to the lower classes. Sometimes to beggars, sometimes to dogs, and yes, often to you. You don't mind? The nobleman's discarded trencher might still have a bit of pigeon pie flavor soaked in. You quickly learn to identify the wealthier guests by how greasy their bread becomes. There's a hierarchy even among leftovers. As you lift the heavy slabs of bread, careful not to spill their soaked contents on your only tunic. You wonder whether the nobility ever realizes how many lives orbit their meals. Probably not. Scrape the table down with a linen rag that's seen better decades, then sweep the rushes on the floor into a pile. Some are infused with herbs, lavender, mint, sweet woodruff mint, to counteract the less charming smells of the hall. It's not working very well. The floor beneath your feet is hard-packed, but often uneven. You've tripped more than once on a loose stone. Once you even knocked a platter clean off the sideboard. The cook threatened to roast you in place of the duck. You still aren't sure whether she was joking. Above you, the table now gleams in the early light filtering through the stained glass window. It's been polished so smooth that your reflection-tired eyes, hair hastily tied back, is visible for just a second before the flickering light obscures it. The table itself is worth a fortune. Hand-carved, dark as mahogany, with twisted legs like tree roots. It's not just furniture, it's a symbol of wealth, of status, of power, and every night, your spine learns its contours by heart. Historians still debate how often trenchers were actually eaten versus discarded. Some claim the poor relied on them as a staple. Others suggest that many were simply thrown away or fed to animals. But you've eaten enough to know they're edible, if not exactly enjoyable. A trencher with gravy is a gift, a dry one, challenge. You spend a few moments eyeing the great chair at the head of the table, the master's seat. You're not allowed to touch it, only dust it from a distance, like a sacred relic. Its arms are carved with lions. You once imagined what it would feel like to sit there. You didn't allow yourself to dream too long. After cleaning, you help reset the table. This isn't just for meals, it's a stage. Silver platters catch the light, goblets are aligned with military precision. And the salt cellar, massive, ornate, and more valuable than your entire extended family, is placed dead center. You're not allowed to polish that, only the steward is. The feast from the night before is gone now, like a strange and sweaty dream. All that remains is the smell-in. Maybe a few questionable stains on the far end where someone spilled ale trying to kiss their cousin. You don't ask questions, you just scrub. As you finish, you spot the dog again, the Lord's hunting hound. It's sprawled across the hearth like it owns the place.
Ah!
In some ways it does. It sleeps better than you do, eats better than you do, and once you saw it wearing a velvet collar. You consider this fact while brushing sausage crumbs out of your hair. You notice the bread knife has gone missing. Again, this happens more than it should. Whether due to theft, laziness, or some servant quietly trying to whittle themselves a better life, cutlery disappears. And guess who's always suspected first? You. You, the one closest to the table. You who sleeps beneath it. You whose fingerprints are all over the scene of the culinary crime. You sigh and check the pantry. Nothing. Then you ask the kitchen girl, who shrugs. Finally, you find it behind the ale barrels, just lying there, like a forgotten accusation. You return it silently. The steward gives you a suspicious look, but says nothing. It's somehow worse. As the day progresses, more noise filters into the hall, boots on stone, heels on oak. Voices rise, fall, bicker and bargain. You hover, listening for orders, always half ready to sprint across the estate for a single plum, or a message that turns out to be tell the cook not to burn the carrots again. And as you walk past the table once more, your strange splintery bed, you place your hand gently on its underside. No one notices. It's your ritual, a moment of ownership, a strange intimacy with something that will never belong to you. Because in this house, the difference between servant and served is the height of a table. And every night, you crawl beneath it, quietly erasing the day above. It's not just what you do, it's how quietly you do it.
Ow.
In this house, silence is golden.
Ow.
Especially for someone like you, visible only when useful, audible only when spoken to. Learn the art of stillness early on. How to hold your breath when nobility passes. How to vanish into a corner while holding a silver jug. How to seem like furniture or mist. And nowhere is this talent more necessary than under the dinner table. Because as strange as it sounds, sleeping there means more than just proximity to warmth or leftover pie crusts. It means learning to exist in a space without being noticed. You, the human draft excluder, the invisible witness. The lump beneath the linen tablecloth no one acknowledges but everyone assumes will be gone by morning. Tonight, the great hall is alive again. The long table groans under the weight of roasted meats, candied pears, eel pie, and something suspiciously quivering that was likely meant to impress a visiting bishop. The guests are loud. Wine flows freely. You hear laughter, the shriek of someone reacting to a poorly timed joke, and the rhythmic thump of a lute. You're not in the hall. Not exactly. You're just beneath it, curled beside a table leg, half covered by a napkin someone carelessly dropped. The floor is cold, but at least you're out of the wind. You listen. Someone complains about the king's new taxes. Another speculates whether the queen's maid is secretly married. And one man, his voice nasal and full of self-importance, starts, reciting poetry so terrible it makes you question the value of language. Still, you don't move. You don't snicker. You are stone. Historians still argue whether these moments, where servants were physically present during meals, gave them unexpected power. Were they silent spies? Did they pass along gossip? Or were they so browbeaten by rank that nothing they overheard ever left their lips? In your case, it's a mix. You remember every word. You just don't say them out loud, not unless you're sure no one's listening. One time, another servant forgot the rules. He laughed just a little when a guest made an off-color joke about the bishop's hairpiece. The steward noticed. The next morning, the lad was reassigned to poultry gutting. He's never spoken above a whisper since. You shift slightly, careful not to bump the wooden beam above you. You've become something of a contortionist these days. There's a narrow sweet spot under the table, just wide enough to lie still without being trodden on, close enough to the hearth for a hint of warmth. You've claimed it, staked it with your breath and your stubborn refusal to give it up. It's not much, but it's yours. Above, a guest spills gravy onto the tablecloth. The lady of the house makes a noise that's both a sigh and a threat. A maid rushes in to dab at it while apologizing profusely. You stay still, invisible. Your arm itches, a flea probably. You don't scratch. Scratching makes noise. Scratching gets noticed. Later, when the hall empties and the lights dim, you'll inch your way out like a cautious beetle, stretch your legs, and maybe if no one's watching, snatch a half-eaten pear from the sideboard. You've perfected the art of the quiet grab. It's not that anyone told you to be invisible. It's that you learned quickly that visibility leads to trouble. The more you speak, the more likely you are to be caught in something you didn't do. Or worse, something you did. You remember once being asked to repeat something you'd heard? A noblewoman's private quarrel, overheard in the stillness beneath the table. You refused, not out of loyalty necessarily, but because gossip, in your position, is poison.
Peace.
One whispered word, and you could find yourself sleeping not under a table, but under the stars. Silence, in your case, is survival.
Ouch.
And so you develop a kind of sixth sense for when to freeze,
And when to become part of the scenery.
when to breathe shallowly, When to slip behind a tapestry like a ghost and let the moments pass over you. The upside, you hear everything. The cook's petty vendetta against the spice merchant. The young lord's secret fondness for embroidery. The time the priest spilled wine into his cassock and muttered words you were fairly certain aren't in the Bible. The downside. You carry these things like pebbles in your apron. Heavy, inconvenient, impossible to unload. Still you endure, because under this table, on this cold floor, you've built a world of your own. It's a quiet kingdom of crumbs, whispers, and hidden power. And in that kingdom, silence is your crown. The table above you creaks as someone leans on it for support. Another glass clinks. A voice slurs a final toast. And then, mercifully, chairs scrape back. Cloaks rustle. Doors swing shut. You exhale. The great hall grows still, save for the fire's gentle pop and the soft jingle of the dog's collar as it settles nearby. We wait a little longer, just in case. Then, finally, you emerge. Stretch. Shake the stiffness from your limbs. Crawl into your rightful corner. You lie back down on the same spot you left 12 hours ago. And as you close your eyes, you hear one last set of footsteps. The steward. He pauses. You hear him sniff the air as if catching the scent of rebellion. Then he walks away. You smile ever so slightly. You've made it through another day without being seen or worse, heard? You're not supposed to listen, of course. You're just supposed to exist quietly, discreetly, invisibly beneath the oak planks, like a shadow with chores. But listening is inevitable. The table may be solid, but words always find their way through, especially whispers. Tonight the candlelight flickers low, throwing long shadows across the carved stone walls. A fire crackles in the hearth, a jug of wine warms on the embers, and above you, the Lord and his chamberlain lean in closer. Their voices little more than the rustle of parchment. At first you hear only fragments. Portugal, double dowry, her troublesome cousin. But soon the murmurs sharpen, like your ears have been trained by the cold floor and echoing stone. You freeze. You don't want to listen, but you do. There's talk of land disputes, of whispered payments to friars, and of whether the king will notice if a certain letter never arrives. The chamberlain hisses. It must be done quietly. The lord taps his goblet against the wood clink and mutters something about a hunting accident. You blink, that's not about deer. You feel suddenly very awake, and very aware that if anyone realized you were within earshot, your next sleep might be permanent. Historians still argue whether servants like you were deliberately used as informants or simply overlooked entirely until...
Ow.
Of course, someone needed a scapegoat. But in moments like this, you wonder if the chamberlain is whispering softer, just to make sure no one else hears what you now can unhear. The rest of the hall is empty. The musicians have gone. The wine has stopped flowing. But the business of power carries on well past the dancing. Beneath the grand feast and flattery, there's always the hum of quiet threats, backroom deals, and occasionally awkwardly worded poetry written for entirely the wrong person. Like last week, when the young master had his verses read aloud by mistake, verses meant for the baker's daughter, not his cousin. You remember the horrified silence? And the muffled snort from under the table. That snort, incidentally, earned you a week of lard scrubbing in the pantry. You've learned to keep your face still as stone now, even when the conversation above you turns scandalous. Like the time the steward was accused of hiding a pheasant under his robes. You'd seen it. Feathered tail sticking straight out the back like a heraldic flag. No one said anything, of course. Nobility is about pretense. So is servitude. He wriggles slightly, trying not to shift the cloth draped low over the table's edge. One of the dinner guests a night, with a nose like a pickled onion is, droning on about the moral collapse of France. You know this speech? He gives it every Thursday, usually after too much mulled wine. But then someone else speaks, a voice you don't recognize. Female, sharp, amused. She asks whether the bishop's scout has anything to do with his late night. Fondness for almond pastries. There is a pause, a very long pause. You suppress a grin. Then, laughter. Real laughter. Deep and surprised, the kind that makes candles flutter. The kind that makes you remember people Levin, powerful ones are still people. Capable of snorting or knocking over their wine, or, in the case of the lady who just spoke, shifting the entire dynamic of the evening with one well-timed joke. Moments like these remind you that court life is a performance, a delicate ballet of barbs and bows, of veiled insults and exaggerated politeness. And you, beneath the stage, are the silent understudy to it all. You've heard so many secrets under this table that you sometimes wonder what your life would be if you remembered less. But there are other kinds of whispers too. Late at night, when the guests are gone and the servants are left to tidy up, you hear different stories. Hushed confessions. Private sobs from the scullery girl after a letter from home. Angry murmurs from the cook as she throws another burned pudding against the wall. Just once, you heard the old nursemaid sing to herself while folding linens in the corner. A lullaby in a language you didn't understand, but that made the air itself feel warmer. That's the thing about life beneath the table. You hear the lies, but also the truths. And those truths, small, human, whispered, are the ones that keep you going. Tonight, after the last goblet has been cleared and the fire banked low, you're left alone again, with the echoes of secrets. The long table creaks as it settles into silence. The dog wanders in and collapses with a sigh by the hearth. You crawl back under, the wood above you familiar now, almost comforting. You rest your cheek on your bundled apron and let the stolen stories of the evening swirl in your mind. You think about the chamberlain's veiled threats, the bishop's gout, the almond pastries, the laughter, the song, and for a moment you feel less like a servant and more like a spy. Not one who wields power, but one who understands it, who sees it raw and up close. Who knows which lord winces at the mention of war, and which lady hides letters in the folds of her sleeve. You close your eyes and the whispers fade, but not entirely. They never really do. You wake to a sound you know too well, the unmistakable shuffle scrape of boots dragging across the flagstones, followed by a wet thump. Someone's dropped a haunch of meat. Again, you blink blearily, staring at the underside of the oak table. It smells faintly of roasted onions and candle wax. You've barely been asleep an hour, maybe two. The fires burn low, and the air's cold enough to make your breath mist. Still, the day waits for no one, especially not you. You crawl out stiffly, careful not to knock over a goblet someone's forgotten under the bench, and stretch your arms. The great hall looks different at dawn, emptier, quieter, with the mess of last night still clinging to its corners. Crumbs everywhere, grease smears on the flagstones. A curious trail of what you hope is gravy leading toward the buttery, and you hear it. The squeak and scurry of tiny feet, rats, of course, or Tudor rats, robust, bold, and highly educated in the art of terrifying kitchen maids. You spot one perched on the edge of a trencher, nibbling delicately at what's left of the quail stuffing like it's judging the seasoning. You clap your hands. It doesn't move. You clap again, louder this time, and it finally scurries off, tail flicking in disdain. This is your life. You deal with rats, spilled soup, broken crockery, and a nobleman's hound that insists on licking your face every morning like you re his long-lost littermate. There is no dignity here, just duty, routine, and the occasional roasted swan. Yes, swan. Today's breakfast list includes something feathered and ridiculous, which can only mean swan or peacock. The cook hates both. Too many feathers, not enough meat, and the boiling process makes the entire kitchen smell like damp laundry. Still, the bird arrives, delivered in a cart covered with rough cloth, its neck elegantly curved, its wings splayed. Plucking it takes forever. The kitchen boys curse quietly under their breath as they strip it of its royal fluff, stuffing it with herbs and dried cherries and muttering about how the French probably eat frogs instead, have it easier. By the time the swan hits the spit, the fire's roaring again. Help turn the crank slowly, evenly feeling the heat lick your cheeks, your arms, your neck. It's oddly hypnotic, this rhythm. You begin to lose yourself in the glow, the smell, the sizzle, until something drips onto your shoe. You don't want to know what it is. You keep turning. Later, during the meal, you carry dishes into the hall, hands steady, eyes down, spine straight. One misstep, and you could end up wearing boiled swan in front of half the gentry. That happened to the page last week, still scrubbing gravy out of his only cloak. Tonight, the guests are rowdier than usual. Someone's brought a lute. They're singing. A lady laughs too loudly. A knight tries to stand on the bench to reenact a joust and promptly falls backward into the fireplace screen. Embers fly. Nobody blinks. And you, dutiful, tired, nearly asleep on your feet, you weave through it all like a ghost. Delivering platters, replacing goblets, bowing without thinking. Then, at last, the meal is over. Sort of. This is the part they don't tell you about the post-feast hazards. The moment when drunken nobles forget you exist and begin tossing bones over their shoulders. One lands beside your foot. Another bounces off your shin. You grimace and carry on. Then comes the cleanup. You sweep, you mop. You fish out a roasted fig from under the dog. You try not to breathe too deeply when you pass the spilled custard that smells suspiciously. Off you lift a fallen goblet only to discover someone's false tooth nestled beneath it like a tragic pearl. This is also the hour when accidents happen. Like the time a minstrel, overly enthusiastic about a sea shanty, swung his lute into a candelabrum. The wax hit 3 people and the dog. The fire caught someone's sleeve. You put it out with a flagon of ale. No one thanked you. They just shouted about wasting drink. Or last winter, when the floors grew slick with ice, and a visiting abbot fell face first into the venison. He claimed it was divine punishment. You suspected it was the 3rd cup of spiced wine. Historians still debate whether Tudor feasting was as chaotic as the records suggest. Some believe it was ritualized, delicate, choreographed, refined. Others, reading between the lines and stains, suspect it was far closer to a tavern brawl with nicer tableware. You lean toward the second camp, especially when someone leans too far over their trencher and lands with a wet thunk in their neighbor's lap. By the time the laughter dies down and the guests begin to leave, the hall is strewn with wreckage. Half-eaten pies, smeared jelly. A spoon in someone's hat. You glance at the table, the same one you crawl beneath again tonight and wonder how it's still standing. The fire's burned low, the wine jugs are empty, and the dog is licking the bishop's sandals. You tiptoe carefully around a puddle of something gelatinous and begin collecting goblets. You know the drill. This is the rhythm of your days. The feasts, the rats, the falling nights, the roasted swans. And always, the oak table at the center of it. All your ceiling, your shelter, your silent witness. You finish your work, pull your cloak tight, and crawl back beneath its carved edges. There's a raisin stuck to the floor near your elbow. You flick it away and close your eyes. Above you, silence returns. And the table, warmed from elbows and spilled wine, creaks softly like it's breathing with you. You dreamt you were a candlestick. A tall brass candlestick with wax dripping down your sides, stuck in place while everyone danced and dined around you. Not a terrible dream, all things considered. These candlesticks don't have to scrub chamber pots. You wake with a stiff neck and a shoe mark near your cheek. Someone must have kicked you mid-feast again. You'll never know who. The nobles never apologize. In fact, they probably never even notice. The hall is still dark. Morning hasn't quite broken yet, but already there's a hum in the air, the pre-dawn rustle of preparation. You hear pots clanging distantly in the kitchen and the quiet stomp of boots in the outer corridor. Someone's swearing softly, probably the page, tripping over his own enthusiasm again. You sit up and stretch. The cold creeps in under your tunic like a rude joke. Somewhere nearby, a candle flickers to life, and the familiar scent of tallow makes your nose wrinkle. You start your day as usual, bleary, cold, and armed with a damp rag. Your first task is the stairwell. Always the stairwell. It's narrow, winding, and inexplicably sticky. You've long suspected that the Lord's youngest son, who thinks bathing is a French, conspiracy uses the steps as a personal food testing ground. As you scrub, you pass by the tapestry that covers the south wall. It's supposed to depict the Battle of Agincourt, but one of the knights has an oddly serene smile, and someone's drawn a mustache on the king with charcoal. You pause, as always, to admire it. It's a small, private rebellion, one you'll never admit to enjoying. The stairwell clean, you make your way toward the scullery, dodging a girl carrying what appears to be an entire pig's head. She doesn't flinch as she passes. You give her a nod of mutual exhaustion. Breakfast prep is underway. The usual stale bread for servants, boiled eggs for the household. And for the honored guest staying tonight's warm milk with honey, you don't ask why he needs warm milk. You assume some people are born delicate. You're assigned to egg watching this morning. Riveting work. You sit by the boiling pot and wait. The kitchen maid tells you a story while you do something about a goose that laid a golden egg and then exploded. You're not sure if it's a metaphor, or if someone has been spiking the barley water again. Eventually, the eggs are done, and you help arrange them on a pewter platter, garnished with parsley for effect. Presentation matters, especially when nobility insists on pretending that their breakfast has tea passed through 5 pairs of servant hands. As you pass through the great hall to deliver the eggs, you glance at the long table again. Still smells like pickled fish. That stain from the swan feast hasn't entirely come out. You give it another wipe with the corner of your apron. It's the best you can do. Then you stop. There's a scroll tucked under the table leg, not hidden well, just sort of wedged, like someone dropped it and couldn't be bothered to bend down. You glance around. No one's looking. Curiosity wins. You slide it out carefully. The seal is broken. That's your excuse, should anyone catch you. You didn't break it. It was broken already. The handwriting is jagged, hurried. You scan the words. Most of it is hard to decipher names, references to debts, a cryptic line about keeping the Portuguese distracted. You frown. You probably shouldn't be reading this. But you are. Historians still argue about how literate Tudor servants were. Some claim only the upper-rank stewards, clerks, ladies-in-waiting could read or write. But there's plenty of evidence to suggest many learned in secret. You're one of those, taught by a retired friar who traded lessons for ale and quiet. You read slowly, but you read. Tuck the scroll back. Carefully, quietly, you know better than to mention it. You've learned that the less you know, the safer you are. Which is a shame because you know so much. Who's been sneaking sweetmeats from the pantry? Who's hiding an illegitimate child? And who, just this morning, wore 2 left boots to prayer? After breakfast, the lady of the house requests her embroidery frame. You're sent to fetch it from the solar. It's enormous, like someone tried to domesticate a wooden fence. Carry it carefully, weaving through narrow corridors, while trying not to impale anyone. As you pass the courtyard window, you catch a glimpse of the sky, a clear morning for once. Pale blue with the faint promise of warmth. You wonder what it's like out there. Beyond the estate, beyond the next meal, beyond this life of crumbs and whispers. But then someone shouts your name, not your real one, your servant one. You turn, bow, nod, respond. You're back. Table is being reset for the midday meal. You help lay the trenchers fresh ones this time. Someone splurged and used yesterday's bread to feed the pigs, lucky pigs. You smooth the cloth, adjust the goblets, place the salt cellar just so. Your hands move without thinking. This is your rhythm, your ritual. Later, when the nobles return, you'll be beneath the table again, listening, watching, waiting, you think. As you polish the silver platter for the 4th time, that there's a strange sort of peace in all this, rhythm, a knowing. You may never dine at the table, but you know every inch of it. And sometimes, knowledge is the quietest kind of power. You've always wondered why the table doesn't collapse. Every day it holds the weight of roasted oxen, ornate salt cellars, greedy elbows, and the occasional drunk noble who decides to test its sturdiness with a celebratory jig. And yet, it endures. Just like you. Today, as you polish the legs, yes, the legs, you marvel again at the craftsmanship. Thick, hand-carved oak, each one adorned with motifs of grapes, vines, lions, and one very smug-looking cherub who has seen more accidents under this table than any soul should. The steward has declared a feast tonight in honor of a visiting dignitary from the Low Countries. This means 3 things: double the rushes, triple the courses, and absolutely no mistakes. You know better than to get in the cook's way. She's already red in the face, flinging herbs like curses and swearing something fierce in a dialect no one dares identify. You're on errand duty again, first to the pantry for cloves, then to the buttery for more ale, then to the still room for rose water, then back again because the kitchen maid swears she said cinnamon. You think she's just lonely? As you dash across the courtyard, you nearly collide with the falconer, who's arguing with the laundress about a hawk that mistook a drying sheet for prey. The bird is now sulking in the rafters. You decide this is none of your business. By the time the feast begins, you've earned approximately 9 blisters, 2 suspiciously identical bruises, and a nickname you're too tired to ask the meaning of. You take your place under the table as the guests arrive. It's a diplomatic affair tonight. The lord wears his finest fur-lined robe, despite the unseasonable heat, and the lady of the house has donned a headdress so wide she nearly takes out a candlestick. The foreign dignitary, whose beard is braided like a tapestry cord, nods solemnly at every dish as if he's mentally ranking the sauces. Dinner begins with fish, always a gamble. The cook has disguised its smell with a crushed almond crust and a sprig of parsley so large it could double as a hedge. It works sort of. You, beneath the table, monitor everything. Who eats with both hands? Who spits into their napkin? Who pretends to chew while slipping morsels into the dog's waiting mouth? Speaking of the dog, it's back, and it likes you now. It licks your ear twice during the second course, which is some kind of game pie. You don't move. You've learned that reacting only encourages it. Instead, you brace yourself against the table leg and try to ignore the sensation of drool slowly trailing down your neck. Historians still argue about the exact social roles of servants during feasts like these. Some say you were mere tools moving parts in the machinery of ceremony. Others suggest a more nuanced position, quiet observers, essential to the flow, both present and invisible. You suspect the truth lies somewhere between the soup and the subtlety. Midway through the meal, the visiting dignitary leans toward the lord and whispers something in a language you don't recognize. The steward stiffens. The lady smiles a little too quickly. The air shifts. You can't say what it means, but you feel the tension rise, like a lute string pulled just a touch too tight. That's when the bread incident happens. Someone, likely the third son, who always thinks himself hilarious, decides to juggle the loaves. It does not go well. One bread roll lands in the custard, another bounces off the dignitary's sleeve. The third, by some miracle of physics, rolls directly under the table and hits you square in the nose. You don't move. You don't sneeze. You are a marble statue beneath an oak cathedral. Later, you hear muffled apologies. More wine is poured. The moment passes, but not before the third son is sent to reflect in the chapel. You suspect he'll be back before pudding. As dessert arrives, something sticky and spiced you. Catch a sliver of conversation that pricks your ears. It's about land, fences, river rights. It's a sort of talk that usually leads to paperwork and occasionally duels. You shift slightly for a better listen and feel a toe prod your ribs. You freeze. It's the steward. You don't need to see his face to know. A toe says it all. You're here to listen, not to eavesdrop. Point taken. The feast winds down. There's a toast to the crown, another to trade, and a third to the excellence of the pudding, which everyone claps for far too enthusiastically. Someone tries to start a song, but forgets the words halfway through and devolves into humming. You hum along quietly. Beneath the table, your own private concert. When the guests finally stagger out, you wait until the last pair of heels fades down the corridor. Then, with a creak and a stretch, you crawl out. The hall smells like roasted pears and people who've been sitting too long. Your table still stands proud. It's untouched by spilled gravy or bad politics. You place your hand on the leg with the smug cherub and give it a gentle pat. You've both survived another feast. There's a storm tonight. Not the metaphorical kind, though. Those are frequent enough in this household, but a proper bone-rattling Tudor tempest.
Ow.
Rain pelts the stained glass windows like thrown pebbles, wind howls down the chimneys, and somewhere up in the rafters, something large and wet is flapping against the shutters with the determination of a goose having a midlife crisis. You're already wet. Before dinner was even served, you were sent into the courtyard to retrieve a delivery that turned out to be spoiled apples and one very cross messenger. By the time you returned, the hem of your tunic was soaked, your shoes squelched, and the dog decided you smelled interesting enough to follow for the next 2 hours. Now, you're back under the table, drying slowly by proximity to the fire, which casts orange shadows up the stone pillars. The noble guests are unusually subdued tonight, perhaps unnerved by the thunder roar, perhaps just too full of onion tart to speak. The hall feels smaller when it rains, the ceiling lower, the air damper. The table above you groans occasionally, reacting to the shifting humidity, like it is sighing in protest of yet another soggy evening filled with loud humans and clumsy elbows. One of those elbows knocks over a goblet. Red wine hits the tablecloth with a schluck and soon begins to trickle over the edge. You instinctively shift out of the way. Too late, a drop lands on your brow. You stare up at the wooden slats and remind yourself, this is your shelter, your bed, your ceiling, and sometimes your sponge. Later, a visiting friar begins to speak at length about celestial signs. You know the type. He is the one who stares at clouds and insists they spell out royal marriages or impending floods. Tonight, he's convinced the storm means divine displeasure about a goose theft that occurred in the neighboring village. You refrain from mentioning you know exactly who took the goose and why. Spoiler, it was hunger, and also boredom. The conversation shifts to weather superstitions. One of the ladies mentions how her aunt used to stuff rosemary into her bodice to ward off thunder. A knight counters by claiming he once survived lightning by lying flat on the ground and reciting the Lord's Prayer backward. No one dares question it. You, however, think the only miracle here is that half these people, Haven Tea, accidentally set themselves on fire with their sleeves. Historians still puzzle over Tudor weather beliefs. Some were born of ancient pagan customs, others from simple trial and error. But beneath the table, you hear the real stories, the ones that never make it into books. Like the maid who swore by goose grease to cure a cough, or the steward who blamed his gout on sleeping under a cracked window. You shift slightly, trying to avoid a puddle that started to creep under the threshold. The hall may be grand, but it leaks like a bucket with opinions. The dog is snoring beside you again, curled like a comma at your side. His breath smells like poultry and misplaced authority. You forgive him, mostly because he's warm. As the meal winds down, someone tries to lighten the mood with riddles. What walks on four legs in the morning? Oh, not that one again, groans another guest. So instead, they try drinking games, which devolve rapidly into one nobleman confessing. He once lost a duel because his breeches split mid-lunge. You stifle a laugh, then cough to cover it. The steward hears. You feel the toe nudge again. Right rib, 3 prods. Translation, less amusement, more invisibility. Got it, but it's hard not to chuckle when one guest asks if thunder is caused by clouds colliding too enthusiastically. You picture the clouds bumping into each other like bashful dancers, apologizing with rain. You smile, then you stop smiling. Too risky. After dessert, which is a suspiciously watery apple pudding, you slip out to help clean. The fire crackles low, throwing flickering shadows across the long table. Your hand brushes over the grain of the wood as you pass. You've memorized every groove now, every dent and nick. There is a burn mark on the underside. Someone once held a candle too close during a game of cards. No one noticed but you. You often wonder how old this table is. Whether it's witnessed generations of nobles come and go, if it remembers the times before you or the servants who came before that, you'd like to think it does. That somewhere in its creaking joints is the memory of every crumb, every elbow, every secret. Tonight, as you wipe the table's surface clean, a sliver of parchment, caught between 2 boards. You ease it free. It's damp from wine but legible. A name, a date, and a phrase in Latin you can't fully translate, but recognize enough to know. It's part of a will. You blink. Who hides part of a will in a dinner table? You tuck it away. You don't know what it means. Not yet, but you will. Because if there's one thing you've learned beneath this table, it's that silence is useful, but memory is power. The storm still rages outside, rain lashes the glass, the wind howls. But in here, the table is steady, solid, dry. You return beneath it. Curl up beside the dog and let the thunder roll overhead. The nobles sleep upstairs, but the real watcher sleeps here under the oak, between the secrets. Some nights you can't sleep, even under the table. It's not the cold, not the hard floor, or the scratchy wool blanket, or even the occasional toe that finds your ribs by mistake. No, it's your thoughts busier than the kitchen on pudding day, churning and clanking and steaming up your skull like a pot that refuses to settle. Tonight is one of those nights. The feast is long over. The hall is quieted, and the last of the goblets have been collected. The dog is curled at your feet, and yet you lie there staring at the underside of the table like it holds answers. Maybe it does. There's a knot in the wood directly above your face, shaped like a bird. A robin, maybe, or a goose. You've stared at it so often it feels like an old friend. You've named it Even Sir Beaky. He looks perpetually surprised, which you suppose is fitting. You often are, too. You roll over. Your elbow hits the hidden pouch you stitched into your tunic lining last winter. Inside, a few coins, a button you found that looks oddly regal, and now the fragment of that will. You haven't told anyone. You don't plan to. Because down here, secrets are currency. And you're starting to understand that in a house built on hierarchy, information flows not down but under. Historians still debate the autonomy of lower-tier Tudor servants. Did they have influence, or were they entirely at the mercy of the upstairs elite? You suspect the truth is muddier like most things in this drafty stone box of a world. You're not powerless, but you are overlooked, and that makes you dangerous in ways no one notices. For example, the cook's assistant. He's new, eager, too eager, tries to make everyone laugh. Last week, he burned the leeks and blamed the pot. This morning, he asked you if it is true. The steward once stole a jeweled comb from the lady's chamber. You smiled. Said nothing. Later, you saw him scrubbing soot with a rag soaked in vinegar and shame. You don't know who told the steward, he asked. You don't need to. There are eyes everywhere. But yours are the most practiced. Because under this table, you've watched it all unfold. The shifting alliances. The friendships formed over shared bread crusts and crumbled dignity. The quiet rivalries like between the laundress and the underbutler, who pretend civility but once tried to outdo each other with scented sachets in the linen press. The hall smelled like lavender and crushed ego for a week. You hear it all, see it all, even when you wish you didn't, like yesterday. You were fetching wine from the cellar, dark, cool, echoing with old dust, and you saw the Lord's son thirdborn, not known for brilliance, slipping a ring into his boot, not his ring, not his boot, the steward's. You said nothing, of course. Later, the steward accused the gardener. The gardener in turn glared at the goat, which granted has a history of theft, but still, you know the truth. And that's the problem. Knowledge is sticky. It clings to you, drags behind like a trailing hem. You can't throw it off, can only carry it well. So tonight, when sleep won't come, you revisit the fragments in your mind like a puzzle. The will, the ring, the whispered negotiations about river rights, the steward's strange comment about keeping things quiet. You start to suspect the table isn't just where things happen, it's where they're decided. You wonder how many papers have been passed beneath it. How many feet have tapped nervously beneath these beams as words were exchanged above. You wonder if Sir Beaky knows. He watches after all. And yet, for all this quiet intrigue, your world remains ... routine. In the morning, you'll sweep. You'll fetch more herbs. You'll chase rats from the pantry. You'll polish goblets until you can see your own eyes looking back in wonder, for a moment whose eyes they really are. But tonight you just lie still, listening. Rain still falls, but softer now, like a lullaby. You reach into your pouch, touch the folded paper inside. Just for a second, then you close your eyes. The fire pops once. The dog sighs. Somewhere far above, a bell tolls. And beneath the table, between secrets and sleep, you drift. You wake before dawn again. Not because anyone called you, but because the table shifted. It does that sometimes. It's not in a haunted way. Nothing dramatic. It's just a subtle, almost polite, groan from the wood above, as the stone walls around it exhale with the chill. It's as if the whole room takes a breath, and the table joins in. You stretch slowly, careful not to knock your head against the beams, and sit up. It's quiet. Even the dog still snoring. The fire's burned down to its orange bones. Shadows stretch long across the hall, mingling with the rushes. Your routine begins the way it always does. Sweep the hall, check for leftover scraps, smooth the linens. Ignore the puddle by the door that nobody ever admits to making. The noble household still sleeps. You, however, are sent to the still room. It's candle-making day. Ah yes, candle-making. The delightful blend of scalding tallow, foul-smelling smoke, and the persistent question of how one can possibly get wax out of wool. The answer? You can't. You just accept your new patchy cloak and call it fashionably distressed. You arrive to find the still room maid already elbows deep in melted fat, her brow shiny with effort. She hands you a wick. You know what to do? Dip, lift, twist, hang, repeat. The scent is unbearable, a mixture of boiled animal and regret. But the candles are important. Without them, the household descends into chaos, nobles bump into columns. The steward steps on the dog, and someone inevitably mistakes the soup tureen for a chamber pot. You endure. As you dip the wicks, she tells you stories. About a cousin who ran away with a traveling magician, about a monk who tried to invent perfume and ended up setting fire to his own beard. You nod, smile, laugh, where appropriate. These moments small, flickering are the warmth of servant life. They don't make the work easier, but they make it bearable. After candles, you're sent to deliver linens to the upper chambers, a rare glimpse of upstairs life. The hallways are quieter there, the carpet's thicker. The air smells of rosewater and importance. You walk softly, head bowed, careful not to brush against the wall hangings. You pass the solar, the chapel, the door that always stays locked. Then the ladies' chamber. You enter only after knocking twice and waiting for the soft call of yes. Inside, an ocean of silk and carved oak. A fire crackles. A maid brushes the lady's hair. You deliver the linens, set them precisely where instructed, and are dismissed with a nod so imperceptible it might have been a sneeze. You back out, bowing slightly. You don't look up, but you hear. Just before the door shuts, a voice soft, urgent tasks. Have you seen it yet? And another replies, no, but the steward's been searching. The door closes. You stand in the hallway for a beat too long, linen still warm in your arms. They're talking about the will. You're sure of it now. That scrap you found under the table, it wasn't just forgotten. It was hidden, which means someone's looking. Desperately. It's probably not because they're worried about inheritance protocol either. You descend the stairs more slowly than usual. The table waits below, stoic and silent. You look at it differently now, not just as a place of rest. It's not even as the stage beneath the performance, but as a vault. A hiding place. Crossroads. Back in the hall, you pass the new page. He's polishing the goblets badly. You quietly adjust one. He grins sheepishly and mutters, I thought the dog licked them clean. You don't dignify that with an answer. Later, while fetching more rushes, you hear someone, perhaps the steward himself, phrasing his voice near the kitchens. What do you mean it's gone? You pause at the corner. Gone. It must be the other half of the will, or the original, or something equally important to people who wear fur indoors. You duck out of sight. You're not supposed to be here. You're not supposed to know, but you do. Return to your place under the table earlier than usual that night. You're not tired yet, just thinking. Sir Beaky above you looks smug as ever. The dog eventually settles beside you as if you're the only part of this world he trusts not to fall over. You curl up, hand tucked beneath your tunic, feeling the folded parchment press against your ribs. You don't know what it says yet, but you're restarting to suspect that knowing too much might be your most valuable possession, and your most dangerous. For now, you keep quiet. As the table creaks gently overhead and the fire flickers its lazy glow across the flagstones, you let your breath slow, because down here no one sees you, and in that invisibility lies power. This morning begins with a spilled pot of barley stew and a shrieking goose in the kitchen. You're not sure which is worse. The stew, which has oozed across the floor in a bubbling tide of beige despair, or the goose, who is currently flapping its wings like a demon in feathers having escaped from the spit mid-basting. The cook is beside herself. The kitchen boy has retreated under a bench. You, naturally, are tasked with catching the goose. Goose wrangling is not in your job description, but neither is surviving on stale bread and sarcasm, and yet here you are. You corner it near the buttery. It hisses. You hiss back. It lunges. You dodge. Eventually, after a dance that would be comical, if not so exhausting, you manage to throw a cloth over its head and wrestle it into submission. You return to the kitchen, with the goose cradled like a furious baby. The cook merely nods and mutters something about needing stronger twine. No thank you. No well done. Just back to the spit it goes. Such is the glory of servant life. Later, the steward calls a meeting. This never happens. You gather in the main hall, scullery maids, pages, kitchen boys, stable lads, and yourself, all standing in uneven rows, clutching aprons and avoiding eye contact. The steward stands at the high table, fingers steepled, expression unreadable. There is a matter of importance, he says, and I expect full cooperation. Ah, so it's that kind of day. He doesn't mention the will, doesn't mention what's missing. but his gaze lingers just a little too long as he speaks of discipline and loyalty and consequences for secrets. You lower your eyes, say nothing. Under the table, you are invisible. Out here, you are careful. After the meeting, tasks resume with unusual briskness. Everyone moves faster, quieter. Tension hangs in the air like smoke. You notice the new page whispering to the laundress, the cook speaking in code with the assistant. Even the dog seems subdued, curling beneath the bench like it's expecting a thunderclap. You keep to yourself. Your job today is cleaning the candle sconces along the upper hall. It's dull, waxy work, and it gives you time to think. You replay the fragments, the broken seal, the lady's chamber whisper, the steward's unease, the missing ring, and the will, still folded in your pouch. You haven't opened it again. Not fully, just enough to see the name. Not the Lord. His brother. The one who died last winter fever, they said. You remember. The hall was silent for days. Everyone wore dark colors. The lady wept behind a veil. But there was a whisper, only a whisper, that he had intended to change the line of inheritance. That the current lord was not to be the heir. Till now it had been just gossip. Now the paper in your possession may very well prove it. You nearly drop a candle holder. This table you've slept under, swept around, served at, and sheltered beneath, that might be the stage for a quiet battle of succession. It's not swords and sieges, but parchments and seals, knowledge and silence. And here you are. At the center of it, a servant. A Taurian's rarely named servants in tales of dynastic struggle. We are footnotes, if anything, anonymous maid, nameless page, unidentified boy. Yet who else hears the secrets? Sees the meetings, finds the papers left beneath the table's edge. You finish the sconces and descend the stairs. The dog follows. He seems to know something shifted. Dinner is lighter tonight. No guests, just the household, speaking in quieter tones. The lord eats quickly, eyes flicking occasionally toward the steward. The lady barely touches her food. You return beneath the table, hands folded, mind racing. What would happen if you gave the will to the lady? What if you gave it to the steward? Or what if you simply disappeared, started fresh in another town with just the pouch and the parchment? You almost laugh. Where would you go? You have no trade, no name of importance, no coin beyond what's in your bundle. And yet, you have something they don't. You have the truth, and that's not nothing. The table creaks above you. Sir Beaky stares. You reach into your tunic, feel the folded edge of the will, still tucked where only you can find it. You press your palm to the cool stone floor, grounding yourself. Not making a decision yet, just knowing that you could. You look at the table leg. The one with the burn mark, your corner. It's always known more than it shows, so perhaps have you? The hall smells like beeswax and tension. You're polishing the floor again, not because it needs it, but because busy hands attract fewer questions. There's a new hush in the air, a silence heavy with anticipation, like the sky before hail. Servants keep their voices low, eyes flicking like sparrows. Something is coming, and you're under the table again, not sleeping this time, just thinking. You trace the grooves in the wood grain absent-mindedly with a rag, remembering which knots resemble faces. Sir Beaky, the winking monk, the one-eyed hog. The gang's all here. They've watched you grow smaller under pressure, quieter under scrutiny, smarter underfoot. The will still rests inside your tunic, tucked close. It's warm now, shaped to your ribs. You could forget it was there if not for the sudden way people are moving, watching, whispering. You notice the steward speaking to the butler in the corridor. They lean close. The words are sharp but muffled. The butler nods and disappears. The steward lingers. His eyes drift to the great table. You look away. Later, you're summoned. By name. Not your given name, of course. Not the one your mother sang when she braided your hair before you left for service all those years ago, but the name the house gave you. Boy. Even though you're not one, it echoes through the hall like a commandment. You rise from your spot beneath the table, legs stiff, mind racing. You're led to the steward's office. Dark wood, leaded glass, shelves lined with scrolls and an absurd number of inkwells. He sits behind a desk, steepling his fingers against his favorite pose when trying to look both patient and intimidating. You've been here a long while, he begins. You nod. You're observant. Another nod. Dangerous territory now. He leans forward slightly. Tell me, have you seen anything odd? Out of place? You pause just long enough to make it believable. No, sir. He studies your face. Long enough for you to count each second in your pulse. Then, he leans back, folds his arms, and exhales. Strange, he murmurs, more to himself than to you. It's as if the house itself has gone silent. You say nothing. He dismisses you. You bow, step back, leave. Outside his chamber, you breathe again. The dog is waiting, follows you back to the hall, tail twitching like he's in on the game. You crawl back beneath the table. You're safer here. Historians still debate how much servants chose silence and how much it was pressed upon them like a second skin. But down here you know better. Silence isn't submission, it's strategy. It's listening until the right moment. And today, that moment arrives. Just before dusk, you're polishing the bench legs when a commotion stirs upstairs. Shout. The thunder of boots on stone. A door slams. Then silence again. Too brief to explain. Too loud to ignore. Within the hour, the hall is filled with tension once more. A note is delivered to the lady of the house, sealed, hurried, crumpled. She reads it. Her hand trembles just slightly, but her face stays composed. She asks for more candles to be lit, then retires early. As you pass the steward later, speaking sharply to a courier. No, he says, nothing leaves this house tonight. You tuck that away with the rest. By evening, you know. Now the will is missing. Not just a rumor now, confirmed in glances, in closed-door conversations, in the way the steward begins searching rooms with too much interest. The new page is questioned. The laundress, too. A kitchen boy is weeping by the stables. No one questions you. You're beneath the table. It's always. That night, when the hall is finally empty, you sit up in the dark. You remove the folded parchment from your tunic. Hold it in your hands. It's no longer just a scrap of ink and vellum. It's a lever, a possibility, a life with choices. And like all powerful things, it asks a price. You could give it to the lady. You could show the steward. You could vanish, quietly, and let them wonder forever. Or you could do nothing. Because perhaps the best place for a secret is not in a chamber or a vault, but here, under the very table it was meant to control. You light a single candle. The flame dances across the wood. Sir Beaky stares. You stare back and fold the will again. Right. Tuck it away. Not yet. Not tonight. Tonight, the table feels heavier. Not in any physical sense. It's the same massive slab of oak it's always been. But the air beneath it is thicker somehow, so the weight of every word spoken above has soaked down into the grain and settled around you like damp wool. You sit beneath it, cross-legged, hands in your lap, the dog curled beside you with a quiet, expectant look. He knows something has shifted. So do you. Because the hall is silent in the wrong way. It's the kind of silence that follows a decision. Earlier that day, the steward stopped calling servants by name. He barked orders, didn't wait for responses. Even the cook, who normally met his temper with her own, stayed unusually quiet. The house feels clenched, bracing. You saw it happen? Just for a moment when the courier arrived from town. The lady of the house took the letter with fingers too steady to be real. She read it once, twice. You weren't supposed to be there. You were bringing a tray of dried lavender for the bedchambers. You set it down and slipped away unnoticed. Mostly. Now you sit under the table, knees drawn in, thinking. This piece of wood has been your roof, your witness, your teacher. You've learned more here than in any classroom or church. You've watched power whisper, lies served on silver plates, watched inheritance decided not by blood but by paper and silence. And in your hand you still hold that silence. The will. It's no longer just a curiosity. It's not even a mystery. It's a key. Not like any key, it opens something. But whether it leads to freedom or ruin or merely another locked room, you still don't know. The dog shifts beside you, pressing warm fur against your arm. You scratch behind his ear. He sighs. You wonder who the house would choose if it could speak. The current lord, rigid, proud, loyal to a name more than the people who serve it? Or the brother, now dead, who once gave you half a pair when no one else was looking? The brother whose name is inked on this fragile piece of parchment you've hidden so carefully? Historians still argue about the impact of lost wills and unclaimed legacies. Some insist it changed nothing. Others claim it rewrote fates. You believe both. Because from beneath the table, you've seen lives altered by a whisper, and others ground down by the inertia of the same old names. The steward passes through the hall again. He walks slower now, not because he's tired, but because he's hunting. You can feel it in the rhythm of his steps. Deliberate. Listening, you hold still. He doesn't look under the table. Not tonight. You wait until the fire has died down to embers. Until even the guards outside have started humming to keep themselves awake. Then, very carefully, you ease out from under the table, the will in your hand. You cross the hall. Every step echoes louder than it should. The stone is colder tonight. The wind outside sings low through the slits in the shutters. You reach the lady's chamber. You don't knock. Back down the stairs. Back under the table. You lie down, not as a servant, not as a shadow, but as someone who made a choice. And now, the house must make its own. The fire is almost out now, a soft red glow pulsing like the final heartbeat of the day. The hall is still. No footsteps, no voices. Only the gentle breath of the wind curling in through the cracks, carrying the faint scent of lavender and old smoke. The dog shifts beside you one last time, then settles fully, letting sleep take him. You follow. The rushes beneath you are cool but not uncomfortable. Stone supports you. It's the oak above, strong, heavy, patient of her shelter, as it always has. The table, this quiet, stoic witness to every story, seems to breathe with you now, as if it too is finally exhaling. You're no longer thinking about secrets or parchments or what may come with the morning light. Those thoughts are for another time, another day. Right now, it's enough to lie still, to listen, to feel the slow rhythm of your chest, the stretch of your fingers, the way your body finally settles into softness after so many days of hardness. You're safe here, not because the world above has changed, but because you have. Whatever happens tomorrow, you know this. You are not just a name without a page. You're not just the shadow beneath the feast. You are the story between the sentences, the silence between the steps, and as sleep drapes itself over your shoulders like a warm, invisible cloak, you let go. Of the noise, of the duty, the weight, you let go, and you drift.